Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation on Gift of Healing TV. I'm Sarah Jane, and I am delighted to be joined by my co-host, Scott Holmes. Scott, welcome.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
And our two amazing guests, Michol Mae. Michol, hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I am delighted to be here. Can't wait to learn more about Frank, and I already know you and Scott, so I am just thrilled to be here. Do you want me to go into a little bit about why I'm here?
In a minute.
Okay.
Let me say hi to Frank first. Hi, yes. Frank. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so glad to join you again, and Michol, also looking to hear your story as well. So it's all good. Beautiful day here in Southern Virginia. So it's nice.
Three of you coming from the States, and I'm here in the little old UK. Anyway, let's start. Michol, just share a little about yourself and what you do, and then Frank will come to you.
So I'm Michol Mae. I am a programmer by day, and I am an artist by night. So I love to spread wisdom through writing and music and artwork. And my mission is to grow emotional intelligence and help foster growth through creativity and curiosity.
Love that. Frank, share a little about yourself, please.
Well, Michol, we have a lot in if you mean programmer or computer, we have a lot in common. I'm a computer scientist by day, and an inventor on that side of the world, and also writer, author, and super interested in sort of helping people heal. I went through my own healing journey, and you just got a big heart for those who are struggling and trying to sort it out. So, that's sort of my work in the world. So.
Brilliant. Thank you. Scott, have you got a question you'd like us to start with?
Wow.
Mention.
Wow. Now we have these multi-talented people here with us today, and it's absolutely great. Michol and Frank, I'll ask you both this, and that is, what brings you the biggest joy? What brings you that feeling of, yeah, I got this? What is it that brings that? With everything you do and everything that you're involved with, and you're both very talented and you're both very artistic and creative. What brings that to you? Michol?
So that's a tough one because it depends on what's happening in my life. But I will say I have recently realized that when I don't sing, I feel like I'm not feeding my soul. Right? Well, any kind of art, really. Writing has saved my life a million times over, but since the time I could talk, I would sing. And so that, and if I need to move my body, dancing, so music, I guess, would be the one thing that I just don't know how I would survive without it.
And Frank?
I think for me, it's similar. I mean, I certainly love all the work and crafts and things that I do, but, really sort of sits my day is, a pot of tea in the morning and some just time out in nature, just to feel what's going on in my soul, what's going on in the world, and just feel like the world can be slow for a couple of minutes, and can hear my inner voice, and that's sets the day. Super brings me joy is really being with people and just being engaged. I love that part of life.
That's amazing.
What about you, Scott?
What brings it's the creation, and what I found in dealing with clients is that when the creative part of them gets shut off, it means everything else is not in alignment, not everything else isn't working. But when they're creative, whether it's knitting, sewing, singing, playing, writing, whatever it is they do that brings them joy, if they're not doing that, that's really a sign that they're not in alignment. And in the same way with me, when I'm there, I'm writing. I'm constantly reaching out to people. It's collaborating, reaching out. As I get older, I want to collaborate more with people, and being on programs such as this allows me to meet all these wonderful people.
And do you know, I love doing these. I love connecting, sort of connected with so many wonderful people through LinkedIn, because I do reach out to people. But I also love something that's creative. I can't even really name what it is, because I think creativity is something that too many people have let go of in their life. It's one of the things that it's a massive project, and I wish I would be able to do it, but the probably the millions it would take to do sort of sadly are unlikely to happen. But universe, you know what it is, you can bring it. But creativity would be something that I would bring into that, encouraging people to actually tap back into their creativity, whatever that might be. And talking about creativity, the reason the four of us are here is because of this particular book, because we all got creative to be part of Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment, which we were all part of when it was released. Well, it's still part of. It was released last October. That's why we've come together to share some of our wisdom, but not from what we shared in the book, but something different beyond that. So the first thing I've got on the list, because we've chosen a couple of things: navigating life when things feel like chaos. So who would like to start?
Michol, go ahead.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I used to be referred to as a chaos master because I thrive in chaos. I'm really responsive. I'm very reactive if it's a chaotic emergency situation. However, I need routine and I hate that I need it because I love my chaos. And little things like could be a life-threatening emergency and I'm right there and I'm good and I'm helping people and I'm reactive, but I can't pick up the gum wrapper that's on the floor 5 feet away because my brain is starting to shut down because there's too much of a mess and too much chaos in my space. So for me, it was learning where that balance is. Like the world is unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. Like it's chaotic by nature. It is what it is. But finding pockets of peace for me and being able to facilitate what that looks like for me. Because I have a weirdly wired brain. So what I had to do is I started to create controlled chaos. I would turn on a timer and I would set it for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes. And I have to get this room done by the time that timer goes off. And it creates that sense of urgency and chaos that pushes me through to get things where I need to be. Because I know once it's done and everything is in its place, I'll feel better and be able to manage my space. So from a perspective of space, that is kind of how I manage my chaos. And I resonate with Frank's nature. So if it's internal chaos, if it's mind chaos, or I had 2 teenage children, if it's life chaos, right? Every once in a while, what I would do is perspective chasing mixed with nature. I would go to the top of a high mountain and I would go to an overlook and I would look down and we're so small from all the way up there and just breathe and just take in the sights and understand that I'm a very small part, as big an impact as everybody has on the world around them. Everything is so much bigger and all my problems are so much smaller when I look at it that way.
Frank.
Yeah, I think, Michol, one of the odd things is a lot of people who can do what we do sort of live and thrive in the chaotic world. And, you don't go into like computing if you're not used to dealing with just sheer chaos endlessly all the time. And that's sort of the world we live in. But I think the thing that really got me was by the time I got to my mid-40s and sort of had that life collapse, the crush, and lost a parent, lost a miscarriage of a child, lost my ex left, and I lost a job around this contract at the same time, and had to sell the house, and it was in like a 4-year period, and it was just how do you navigate that and not lose your mind to some extent, and it's partly what my chapter is about, but it also told me a whole lot about myself and about people around me, and what it meant to go into quiet spaces in the middle of the chaos and to get up every day and work in it. I recovered, so that's a good thing. But I'll say, those were tough times, but that's what it means to me to kind of live through the chaos. Oddly, now most things feel less chaotic, I guess, if that makes sense at this point after going through all that. But yeah,
I can relate to that. When I lost my 15-year-old died to suicide, and I couldn't stay in the house, so I lost the house, I lost the kid. A year later, I lost the relationship, lost all the things. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I can't believe it took me 45 years to learn it, but one of the biggest lessons that I learned was when I started to lose it over little things, then it was time for self-care. And I don't care if I already was sleeping on the couch all day. If that's what I need to do, then that's what I need to do. Right. Like nothing was worth me getting myself to that place of like, and so I can relate to that. And just one step, I used to say one step at a time is a pretty common saying, or, one day at a time, but sometimes it's 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second at a time. When you're in those kinds of situations, it's being in the now and just moving through it. And that's so hard. And my heart to you for experiencing that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think one of the odd parts about that time was you're forced to slow down. And I think I spent probably 2 years almost every evening, like zombied on a couch with the puppy dog and no input, just to feel through it, pray through it, journal through it, sort it out in my brain, anger through it. It's that grieving experience that we all go through in those times. And it takes time, and a lot, while people were helpful and I had some great family and friends, a lot of this you do yourself, right? You're doing in those quiet moments when you're not distracted by chaos, but you really have to be with yourself, right? And you're kind of trying to sort out, how did it get here at this moment? And it's not as clear. But the good news is you can, right? There's several of us have been, probably all 4 of us has been through that at some level. So the good news is it's possible. And I think even the really good news is that all of us really enjoy helping people through those stages. And I think that's even better news, because you don't have to go along. People who've been through it, right?
Yeah,
got the T-shirt, as they say.
Yeah, the companionship aspect of it. Did you utilize any stream of consciousness or free writing during this time to try to just get everything that was chaotic in your brain out onto the page?
I still do, oddly enough. So I would yes, and I have a belief, and it came from that time, that the pot of tea in the morning is the trigger for my brain, and a journal and a piece of paper is what goes there. And I sort of believe when you're in that veil between night and day, it's kind of like if you wake up in the middle of the night, your brain's thinking about something and you can't go back to sleep. But it also tends to be there right when you first wake up in the morning. And that's when you can really, at least in my mind, hear a bit of the subconscious, the internal turmoil. And so I still do that practice every day and see what's going on in my brain and try to understand, what am I really feeling that I'm ignoring? Because as soon as the day starts, we're caffeinated up and running at full speed. So you can ignore it when you have external stimuli, but you can't ignore it if you stop. And so the answer is that, yes, I fill up journal after journal after journal. I'm afraid someone will find them at some point in time. And
aren't we all?
I have a few journals that have "burn me if you find me" kind of on the front of it. But no, it's the truth, right? Those were feelings that I felt at the time. I don't know that I have the same feeling these days at this point, but they were honest.
Well, yeah, right? As you grow, right, your perspective changes. And I wrote about that in another book I was in, where I said, I started reading at a really young age, and someone had given me A Wrinkle in Time, and I read it. It was an advanced book for me, but I was such a voracious reader when I was a young girl. So I was just like, turn off the flashlight under the covers, you're going to ruin your eyes kind of person, right? But when I read it again after my mother died, right, a few years later when I was 15, it had a whole different meaning to me because I had been through a different experience and my perspective had shifted. I had grown, right? So I feel like that makes sense. And I did burn a couple journals from when I was a teenager that I kind of wish I had now, because I'm like, I would just be curious to read what kind of brand of crazy I had going on at this time. But yeah, I love it. And I still do the stream of consciousness writing. I use it as a regular tool to process specific emotions or just to see where I'm at. Like you said, it's a good check-in. It's a good, like, what's on your mind? Is it the house? Is it your grief? Is it the chaos? What is it?
Scott, because you've been through the bereavement and the loss as well. So
yeah, and that's loss of child and then loss of my wife, my first wife. And it takes you to many, many places that you never thought you were going to go. After a year after my daughter passed, I had my boss come to me, and he said, "Come into the office." And I'm like, "What do you want?" He says, "I need you back." I said, "I've been here every day. I showed up for work every day. I was here." He said, "Yeah, but I haven't seen you smile or laugh in a year. I haven't seen you be here, fully present in a year. Shave off the stupid beard, go home, and when you come back tomorrow, I want you here." He did me a favor. He kicked me in the ass to make me realize I was in that kind of zombie-like state that I couldn't get out of. And the rituals during the morning, much like yourself, Frank, the rituals in the morning have really set me up so that I can handle any chaos that comes down the pike, because it sets me up fully on my feet, aligned, balanced, so that whatever comes through, I can handle. 3 weeks ago, I went through having a heart attack. Very first one. It was a wonderful experience. Not. I had never had it, didn't know it, but when it happened, I knew exactly what it was. And the funny thing was, there was no chaos. There was pain. There was a little trepidation, but there was no worry. I knew things were going to be okay. And you, Nicole, you had mentioned about when chaoses are all around you, you're okay. You're the solid one, right? And in the same way, anytime anything like that comes up, bombs, hurricanes, whatever, I'm always the one that is clear conscious, directing people, having people, settling them down, getting everything in the right position. Afterwards, I may have a reaction. Like, 2 hours later, I might have a reaction, go, "Oh shit, what did I do?" But during that time, in that crisis, in that chaos, I'm right there. I'm able to be present. But it really is the rituals that I've developed over the past 8, 9, 10 years that have really held me instead to be able to deal with the chaos. Miss Sara, you've had a few losses.
Chaos happens in so many different ways. Usually the chaos I don't cope well with is technology. So it's just like, please don't give me anything new. Please don't change things on me. But I think, isn't it about accepting who we are, how we are, and how best? Yeah, rituals. I have my getting up in the morning. I don't necessarily call it a ritual, but I certainly have a sequence of things that I do as I'm doing my getting up, my sort of my gratitudes and sort of breathing exercises and the things that I do. But I also do them at night because a number of years ago, and I know I've shared before, I felt like I'd got lead boots because I felt I was really being kept here on the earth. And I was not allowed to go flying unless it was sort of in meditation, and then I was off the planet. I was gone. So I was very much a matter of, okay, folks, if I promise to ground every day, put my roots down and truly ground every day, can I please lose these lead boots? Much more comfortable grounding. So I ground morning and evening, but I also put my branches up to connect with the higher realms as well as the earth. Whatever works for you. But I think we're all talking about a morning process that we go through to set us up for the day. And my head is absolutely all over the place at the moment because of this new book that I've decided I'm going to lead, that's due for publication on the 1st of April. And it's just like, and it's everywhere. And every now and again, somebody says, but Sarah, I've already sent you that. And it's just like, oh, I'm sorry. So to get it right. No, Sarah, that's not mine. That's somebody else's. It's just like, But do you know what? I'm getting through it. And it's just, and you talked about nature. I have got a little woodland just over the road from me. The shame is it's a busy road. I've been for a walk twice there today so far. Well, I won't be going again tonight. Anyway, twice. It's my getaway from the computer, my getaway from the phone. It's my getaway from everything. And I think that's the thing, is giving ourselves the space and the time. And if you want to go off into a daydream, do it. But just get yourself out of the headspace of work or the things that are, might have been saying this for years, being a complementary health therapist. Give yourself me time. And even when I was working in an office, and I'd done it, I even did it occasionally when it was raining, my lunch break would be a walk out. I would get out of the office and I would go for a walk around the local park when we were in Poole, when we moved over to Bournemouth. It might be down into the town, but it was just get out. No phones, no computers, no nothing. Just get out. And so that's what I always say to clients is make yourself the me time. And one thing I learned was make suggestions from what you do yourself and what works for you. People can do with the suggestions what they like, but if it gives them something to just, oh, well, maybe not that, but how about that? It just gives them a starting place. So we all have chaos in lives. We're always going to have. It's just make the most of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what? I love that you use the word ritual, Frank, because I have to tell you, every single one of my siblings has oppositional defiance disorder. I am happy to report mine is the lowest level amongst them, but I definitely still have it. So I can't even tell myself what to do without it getting a little irritated. So how I got around the routine issue was by calling it ritual. I have a ritual because it doesn't sound like I have to do this thing. I have this ritual. And mine is, I have a mushroom coffee every morning and I take care of my little fur babies. And then I go downstairs and help the outside fur babies. And, it gets me outside, even if I'm not fully out and walking. And Sarah, yes, I used to, when I had to go into office, everyone knew me as the girl who walked with a book. I had my ear pods in and a book, and I would walk the whole area. And every once in a while, someone would stop me. How do you do that? It's peripheral vision. You line yourself up on the on the path. But for me, it helped because, as Frank knows, as being a reader, like that's also part of our piece, right? And you're so right. It depends on what works for you. I feel like we all share, and all four of us are going to share similar things and different things. And that means that whoever is watching can pick through that stuff or try it out. And, oh, that didn't really work for me, but this did, you know? And so we're just trying to give you as many things as we can so that you have what I refer to them as like little tools in my tool belt, right? And I can pull them out whenever I need to give them a try. You know, if I want to color, if I want to write, you know, if I want to go walk and read, you know.
So habits that are, I always think of rituals as habits where you are present. Because it's a habit when you walk in the door that you put the keys down in a particular place, right? And it's a habit. But if you didn't do it and you go to look for your keys, you can't remember where you did it because you weren't present while you're doing that activity. So I always think of rituals as being present while doing that, which is a habit. And it becomes,
I like that.
Because when you're doing an offering, when you're doing something meditation, when you're doing anything else such as that, you have to be very present in order to do it. So it becomes a ritual. It becomes, I think, you're worshiping at the instrument that is you.
Yes. And if you can work in some mindfulness, right? One of my manifestation coaches was talking about this. She said, okay, so you have a ritual for your tea or your coffee. And if when you're drinking it, you're drinking in, you're kind of pouring into your cup, literally, right? What you want to take in, right? And add a little component to that. And we all get busy and things get chaotic and they get hectic. And I think the next important thing for me is to practice self-compassion. I'm still working on it. It's a thing. But being able to not judge yourself as harshly. I mean, I don't judge other people as harshly as I judge myself. So why do I do that, right? So just being able to give yourself the break if you forget to do the ritual or if you forget to, you know, pour your intentions in and just being kind, like you would be to everybody else.
So that's kind of where tea started with me. And that is, I've been doing this since a teenager. I'm quite sure why tea, and more hot tea, which is not normal in the South. But anyway, but over time, from a mindfulness practice, I realized that you smell the tea, especially high quality tea. You know, you can see it and know what type of tea it is. You can touch the cup and feel the heat. You can smell the smell of the tea when it's brewing. It tastes the thickness of the tea when you drink it. And it became that moment of presence. And so because it's a daily ritual or a morning ritual, it also is a ritual throughout the day. So if things are going a little hectic or crazy or whatnot, it's not uncommon for me to stop and go get a cup of tea. And because the practice is so well set as a ritual, even that moment at the office, right, becomes a little ritual. And so you get to bring that moment of presence into the day, right? Because I can still touch the tea, I can still smell the tea, I can still feel the heat of the aroma and the pleasantness of the thickness of the tea. And that brings me back out of the chaos for just a minute. And sometimes all you need is a minute. You just need to break the cycle of what the feeling of the chaos is and go, okay, I know what this is, right? Grind for a minute. And to me, the tea is something that I've used as a trigger, if you will, not a negative trigger, but a positive trigger to remind me that, no, this is, I'm supposed to be mindful.
And you know, it's funny you mention that because that's similar to the PTSD touch, smell, feel, notice, right? See, touch, feel, notice, right? So tea is great because it's got the aroma, you're touching it, you're sensing the heat from it. And what you just described is you know, widely available to folks. But I love the idea of being able to drink it in, you know, and really root yourself in. So you're not waiting. So instead of waiting and being reactive and having your tea because something went wrong, you're being proactive and responsive by saying, okay, I know that things happen during the day. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to live in this moment and touch, feel, smell this tea and have this moment and set everything off right. And that becomes it sounds like an anchor for you throughout your day.
Absolutely. So, Sara talks about she doesn't like technology, but if you live in one of our texts, there's multiple screens and ding, 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 along with what you're doing and the 7 other things that you're trying to do at the same time, but you really aren't doing, because multitasking doesn't actually exist. That's a fabrication of something. But the reality is, for me, is I have to stop and grind. It's the only way to really make it through the day without coming home and just feeling, completely washed out. It's the only way to keep patience. It's the only way to keep focus, really. And of course, like a lot of us, as soon as I finish my day, I go through traffic, right? So sometimes that's an hour and a half of just sitting there, inching along, and which is not that's not an easy, mindful thing to do. But you learn to take those as a mindful activities. Doesn't make them go away, but what it does is, it sort of takes the sting out of the burden, right? Out of the energy, and it lets you control the energy. And I'm a practitioner of Qigong, and my grandmaster said our goal is to control the energy of the universe, right? Or at least maybe our local energy, and that's really what, that's how you do it, one moment at a time, and that's the key. I would loop back to one thing, because y'all all said it. I've always thought that our species is incorrectly named. We're not really Homo sapiens. I think we're kind of Homo narratives, or Homo creatives, or Homo rituals, right? Because it's so key to everything in the world, right? Ritual is, all cultures have rituals. All cultures love story. All cultures love creativity. I mean, it's the heart and driver of the culture. And that feels like that might be a more appropriate name for our species, because that's really at the heart of how we express ourselves and how we truly communicate the outside and inside to those in our culture or people group. So
love it.
I love that.
I'm thinking about creativity. We wouldn't have the computers, we wouldn't have so much that we have in our world today if somebody hadn't got creative. And so it's an absolute essential part. I mean, I think when I was sort of writing and channeling from the dragons, but when I got their names, I was out in nature. It was taking me out of the everyday, and just putting me out there as I walked around into the woods and whatever. And it was just like, okay, which of the dragons wishes to share with me? Sort of, which crystal is it that they're guarding over? What's their name? And then it was trying to remember it getting home. But it's nature, but it's also a brilliant way of switching off from the chaos that's going on, giving your mind that break, whether it's chaos, whether it's work, whatever it is. It's just like, okay, mind, downtime. Because we have to have that downtime. I know I referred to it as me time, but it's downtime. And I know I have to do that every night before I go to bed. And for me, that's actually doing something like a code word or a Sudoku or something like that. Because I've got to concentrate on something that's got nothing to do with work. And providing I finish it, I definitely won't be thinking about it. But whatever works for you, that gives you that ability to be able to be switched off at night. But even after work, whatever it is that works for you, when it works for you. And I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Sara,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Sara, this is counter to modern technology, which is always on. In my younger years, because I'd built a lot of that technology and lived in a lot of that technology, I was on all the time. You wake up, you're on, you fall in bed at night, and you try to be off, but you're actually not off because your brain's still going. And of course, the industrial complex of technology feeds on you always being on and aware and your attention and all that kind of thing. And so you have to curate it. And I only offer this as a thought. When I was younger, I had it wrong. I thought I could catch up on the weekend, or I thought I could catch up on a holiday or a vacation. And that was absolutely the wrong idea, because it was never catching up. Because by the time I got there, I was rushing off to do things on my weekend and holiday and whatnot. And so I had to go back to that. You said me, but I would say it's curated time, that you make a thoughtful choice about what you will fill in that time and how it will ultimately enrich your life, whether it's rest or Sudoku or a book or a journal. But ultimately, it's not the other stuff. And it's really not what the society's telling you to do. It's something you have to curate that works for you. It could be art, it could be whatever. But it's a daily thing. And sometimes as many times as I can put it in my day. Otherwise, I deplete. I deplete all of my energy. I deplete all of my desire. I get frustrated and angry and all the kind of things that everybody else does, because you don't have it. And I think if anybody's listening to this is feeling that, feeling the tension, feeling the stress, feeling that it never ends, feeling the rat race, feeling, as strange as this sounds and as simple as it sounds, it really is the beginning of the answer.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think, anchoring yourself in throughout the day and learning how to transmute your energy was the other thing that was really important for me to learn as a parent, as a person, and learning the identifiers, right? So there were a couple of key things for me as I moved through. One was, I always felt absolutely terrible when I would lose my mind or start yelling with my kids. So how could I change that? How could I move through that? And sometimes you can't, and you just have to be compassionate with yourself. But sometimes, when my teenagers would be full of attitude and I would start to feel myself getting frustrated, I would transmute it. I would stand up with full anger. And as I stood up, because I was so mindful of it, I would push through that feeling. I'm not feeling it. I'm mad, but my gosh, they just need more love. And I would stand up and I would say, you just need more love. And I would chase my children through the house trying to hug them. That energy was still there, though. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I was trying to avoid it or push it away. I was deliberately trying to transform it into something else. And sometimes that works. I do it with my cats every once in a while. They get a little extra, I would say, and I'll just fluff them up, and I just fluff them up some more. And I use all that intensity to just transmute it. And sometimes you can do that, and sometimes you can't. But when you can't, being able to sit and mindfully anchor yourself in is so important. And being able to identify, for me, and I honestly only just recently figured this out. I was getting really frustrated. You ever get frustrated about something that is dumb? Why am I even mad about this? It's such a stupid thing to be aggravated about. And now I'm mad that I'm mad about a dumb thing. And now I'm mad that I'm mad that I'm mad. And it was just out of control. And I was like, what the hell? So I said, you know what? I just came to the conclusion that when that's happening, that is my check engine light. That is my dash light that says you need to stop and you need to do something for you. You need to take care of yourself. Whatever that looks like you said, Frank, right? Sudoku. It could be a glass of sparkling grape juice. It could be tea. It could be reading a book. For the longest time, I couldn't shut my mind off at night. And even if I was falling asleep, everyone here probably experienced this too, right? You're falling asleep on the couch. I'm dead tired. I get up, I go to bed, and now I'm awake again. And I'm, oh my gosh. So you know what I started doing? I actually built in a ritual that I'm going to go to bed at the same time, even though my brain is screaming at me, but if we pull an all-nighter, we'll get all this done. So it was having boundaries with myself, which is a real thing. You got to have boundaries with yourself as well, because your inner child will try to take over. And then I had a couple of things that I tried. One was solitaire. I would play until I won or until I fell asleep, or like Sudoku or some kind of code puzzle. Now, more often than not, I read until I fall asleep because I enjoy it. It's peaceful time for me, and I get to do something without doing something. But I think it's so important to be able to have those anchors. That's the one thing I'm taking away from this conversation today. Anchors. My coffee is an anchor now, guys.
So Michol, one of the things to think about is burnout is not doing enough of what you love.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot.
Burnout is not doing enough of what you love. And so when your day is all those things, so on the backside of my day, you go with the science, right? The science says if you're watching your computer or TV up to the time you go to bed, the blue light's going to keep you from sleeping, right? So you got to disconnect from the lights, right? As we get older, it's really good to do something light like stretching because it helps you feel better when you go to sleep, right? That's, doing the little nightly rituals, be it you take your medicine or, whatever you got to do, right? You do that. So I stretch. I do a little Qigong at night because not to increase my energy, but to let myself ground again. And then reading for about the same amount of time, lights off at about the same amount of time. Your body gets used to it. You get into a rhythm. And we are absolutely, a species of rhythm. And it'll wait. There's some great writers who talk about never writing to your last thought, right? You always leave a little bit of writing for tomorrow, right? So you don't start the day without an idea or a topic. Oh. And I kind of like that's a way to go, right? So, jot a note down and then, in the morning, sit down and take that note and turn it into something new. But you have to curate the evening too. But sleep is as much of a ritual as wake is. And
we've touched a lot on the chaos, and we haven't touched masses on the how often do we grieve throughout our lives. So, Scott, let's start with you. Thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to bring that up myself, but we've all had grief. They call, a divorce is a grieving, is a death of a relationship, death of a connection, death of that. We've all had losses in our lives. I noticed when my wife was getting, she went through a 20-year battle with breast cancer. And toward the last 5 years, she had to quit her job. And she lost her identity. Her identity was as a teacher. She was always a teacher. From the time she was born, she was a teacher. She taught kindergarten when she was 12 years old. She was teaching. Her dad was a teacher. She came from a family of teachers. She was always a teacher. And that loss of identity fractured her. She could not help but grieve that. When I was taking care of my wife, my daughters were grown and they were out of the house. And I really, they didn't do the day-to-day things because they were a bit far away. So I would notice, and my wife lost her ability to drive. She lost her independence at the age of 57. She lost that. And there was a grieving. And in the last couple of years of her life, it's all those small things that she couldn't do anymore where there was grief. There was a grieving when you have those losses. And the loss of connection, the loss of intimacy, the loss of all of those things that my daughters didn't get to experience because, their mom was going to live forever, of course. And they didn't understand how I did so well. And I just told them, because I grieved every single day with your mom, the loss of what she could and couldn't do. I tried as hard as I could to make sure that her quality of life was as good as we could possibly make it. But yeah, it was absolutely. We all have the big losses, of loss of life, loss of a daughter, loss of parents, as we go through life. But the grieving in some ways, depending on where you are in life, it's the little things that you notice that you grieve the loss of. And they always talk about grieving as, okay, that's it, it's done. You carry it always, it becomes a part of you, and it's how you carry it that really defines who you are and what you're able to do. That's what I've found.
I think grieving can be a job, it can be a friendship, it can be absolutely anything. You may have a favorite plant that dies. That's still grief. It's not a matter of belittling anything. Those people who I've never had children, but I have had cats, and slowly but surely they've all gone. And I haven't replaced them because I haven't. And I had such grief. My parents didn't die, but because of what happened, the grief in my childhood was the rejection, was the abandonment that I felt. And that was a loss. That was grief. And then to have a sister die as well. And to ask my mother, where she was putting all Gillian's stuff away, baby in cupboard? Because a little girl, 18 months old, never knew anything different. She didn't know what death was. She'd gone through so much grief already of feeling she'd lost her parents. So we go through many different things. Parents, they move. They take children out of the school they're in and take them to a new school. And that could be miles and miles away, which is a loss of friendship. It's a loss of things that you're used to and you're comfortable with, and things that really can make any of us have to start again. It's a loss of the known. And the unknown can be really good for us and really help us, but it doesn't make it any easier at that point in time, whatever age we are. So it's knowing that it happens to us, and it probably happens to us to a certain degree in a little way most days. And how do we deal with that? And as a child, you don't deal with it. You just bury it. And sometimes as an adult, you do exactly the same, because there is so much chaos going on that you haven't got the time to deal with it. So it's being kind to yourself. You would be kind to the other people if it happened. Treat yourself the way and with the respect and the caring that you treat others with. It's important that you do that for yourself. Nicole, I know I know.
Sarah,
Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed when I looked up I was writing a while back, and I looked up the definition, the stages of grief. I never can remember them off the top of my head, so I looked them up again, and I realized, the first one's denial, numbness, and shock, and I realized how many days I kind of live in numbness, right? Once you get going and you're in work and bargaining, right? You're kind of like bargaining with your work and what's going on, and you're kind of numb, and some days you get kind of down about all the stuff you got to do, and anger, right? And some days your acceptance of it, right? And I realized that these kind of nano or micro moments of grief were cycling through my day. And Michol, when you talked about earlier about being kind of like angry, like at the moment with the kids, that was just a grief moment. The anger portion of the grief, you were trying to bargain with them before, and you were probably trying to deny it before that, right? And so you're right. You're in the cycle, but we don't have a healthy society that talks about the grief cycle that we live in constantly in a modern age with the news and the crazy and chaos going on. And so when we get to a major life grieving cycle, we expect it to be a 3-day event, and then you move on with your life, right? When someone passes, you get 3 days and you start again, right? You go back to work on the 4th day. And because we don't acknowledge the little ones, and practice it as an understanding of grief, we know nothing about the big ones. So we have no foundation to manage or process the large stuff in life, and we struggle through it harshly, and we don't have the love and empathy for other people who are just going through the normal daily routines or even the big life things, because we don't talk about it in society in the words of grief that happen every day in little ways. And once I started changing that in my own head about how I talk to myself about it and show the compassion, oh, I'm just trying to bargain my way out of this, right? Or I'm numb because I'm pushing through this work right now, right? And I'm frustrated because I got to get in, and it's the timeline is crazy, right? It's all those kinds of things. Those are just parts of the grief of that moment. But if we start allowing ourselves to understand that, I see it in other people. I can honor it when they're not in their best, because I can honor it in myself, right? And you can't honor it beyond what you can honor yourself. You can't love beyond what you can offer love or compassion to yourself. And that's helped me a ton, to just be honest about the little griefs, because even the big ones, I learned to navigate them. Oh yeah, I'm really depressed right now. I went through a bit of that over the holidays with my lovely wife being really down, and I felt down for her. And then I went, oh, I'm grieving her grief, right? And I had to acknowledge that to get out of it and to help her get out of it. Okay.
Yeah, I love that you talk more about grief being cyclical, because the 5 stages of grief were never meant to be a finite cycle, right? Like a linear thing. It's not linear, right? You can go back and forth from avoidance or, even acceptance, or, okay, I accepted it, but I'm avoiding it today. Oh, no, today, I'm bargaining it. What if I had a time stone? Can I have a time stone? I could just go back in time. I'm just going to change that. It's going to be good, and it's not linear, right? And I like to tell people, I know it's uncomfortable. I know it's uncomfortable to hear this, but grief will never go away. You loved that person. Grief is love. If you didn't love them, you wouldn't grieve them. You love them, right? And Sara, yeah, pet loss is so underrated, especially if you don't have children. They are your children. My cat had passed the year after Johnny died, and he had been with me. My cat had been with me longer than any other single human being in my life, consistently. And I grieved that, right? And it's more than that. It's because we don't talk about it, Frank is right. We don't talk about it. So people get uncomfortable. So they just want to, well, I don't know, go away, right? Like, I don't want to talk about it. But it's the crazy thing is, it's the one thing we will all have in common. We all grieve. We grieve the could have, the should have, the would have. That jerk that I was dating, it should have been this way. That jerk that just cut me off and wrecked my car, and it was my favorite car, and I'm grieving the stupid car, right? But it's all of those things. It's the death of a dream. If you start to let go of, like, oh, maybe I don't want to be a rock star, but I'm still sad that I never achieved that, right? You know what I mean? It's all of those things and then some, because at a certain point, you can't busy it away. And that was my mistake, right? I thought I was a pro because I experienced so much grief. How could I not know how to handle it, right? I lost person after person after person. My mom died, my grandma died, my other grandparents died, my uncle died, all these people died, right? By the time Johnny died, I really didn't expect it, but the depth at which I grieved, the depth at which I fell, made me aware that I wasn't actually grieving all those people. I was busying it away and avoiding it. And now, as with a lot of, and this is common and people don't talk about it, but when you do experience a death, you then grieve the other people that you lost. right? And they're like all daisy chained together, and you're just like, well, okay, I'm all along for the ride now. And how many things are misdiagnosed because they're really just rooted in grief? Like you said, I hadn't even really thought about it that way, that I might have been in the middle of a grieving the way I thought my life would be, and it's not that way, or grieving that things weren't more simple, and why can't my children act like the people on TV, and why am I not a TV mom? Shouldn't I be more gracious? Now I'm grieving myself. Like, what is this craziness? But it's crazy to me, and I'm passionate. And one of the reasons I was so excited to come on here today is to spread word about normalizing grief, normalizing mental health, normalizing these deeper, darker feelings. Because how often did any of us here experience despair in our grief, but weren't sure we could talk to somebody about it? And that's big.
Back to your journaling, right? The stream of consciousness, right? The value of that in the end is to say, I'm going to put on paper all that stuff jumping out of your brain, and I'm going to realize that I'm angry, and I'm like, why am I angry? That doesn't make sense over that. And then you realize I was kind of depressed about it, and you're like, well, I was really denying it, and I'm really not having the conversation that I need to have with my spouse or my boss or my friend, right? And so what it does is it lets you backtrack and go, oh, okay, and I can go, well, I need to have this conversation I'm really avoiding, right? Because I know it's going to be uncomfortable. And many times the uncomfortability of that conversation is so much smaller than grieving it day in and day out and day in and day out. Like I'm gonna go through the steps 1 through 4, over and over and over again, day in and day out in a relationship. Okay, versus having the hard conversation. And the hard conversation allows me to take that step to, okay, it's not working. We got to do something different. It gets you to something that looks more like it's acceptance. But instead, as a culture, and I think a lot of us grow up that way, we grieve it over and over and over and over and over again. And so we never get to acceptance, right? Because we won't acknowledge it. And if we can acknowledge it, and what I've learned over time is go have the hard conversation. Right? Go be honest. It might hurt. Do it with as much courage and kindness as possible. And most of the time, it cuts that grieving process down really quick and gets you out of the cycle.
And understanding too, I love that you talk about acceptance, right? Because acceptance is an agreement. That's not what that is. Acceptance is accepting that this is what happened. I might not agree and I don't co-sign, but I accept that this is in fact my reality. And understanding too that everyone grieves differently. And that's what you're talking about too, right? Meeting people kind of where they are is something that I learned how to do from grieving, right? And I was able to when somebody else is grieving. And it's a fine line because you don't want to allow disrespect either. And you don't want to be somebody's doormat, but being able to recognize, oh, that person is in the middle of a very serious grief burst right now. And I'm going to give them some grace because I wish I had that. And even if it's a positive thing, we've seen people get a promotion and they're really happy, but they're grieving because they're going to miss their coworkers, or they're going to even potentially positive events can lead to some aspect of grief. So being able to treat people with more kindness and compassion over it, understanding that's where it's coming from, I think is something that we just don't do because we just don't talk about it, right? Like it's like you said, right? It's ingrained in our culture to just, I cannot tell you, I hope none of you have ever heard this, but unfortunately you probably have. Aren't you over that yet? How long are you going to grieve that?
Yeah.
Forever, because I loved them. What is, like, why would you say that to someone? But if they don't know, they don't know. And if we don't talk about it, they'll never know.
You spawned an idea that just came across as I listened to you reflect back what I said. And it's this: the 12-step program begins with, really an acceptance, right? But the The 4 steps before the 12-step program are denial, bargaining, depression, and anger. Grief is everything that cycles before you finally say, I accept my limitations and where I am, and now I'm going to do something different. And so before the 12 steps is grief that just cycles forever, unless you actually get to the point of saying, this is where I am. And I think that's true in life. And I don't, if you're in a horrible relationship or a horrible work relationship or whatever you're grieving about, you're cycling before the 12 steps. You're cycling before you can take the step to do anything if you never get to acceptance. And acceptance like that isn't, I agree. It's just like, it's just what it is. This is what it is. Now what do I do? Now what's my decision? What's my next step? And it's more productive.
And I think it's important to note too, to anybody who's watching, just because you get to that place of acceptance doesn't mean you're not going to grieve. Like, you're still going to have grief bursts. They're still going to come. And it's just important that you learn how to sit with them. And what was really important for me was to know they weren't forever. Because sometimes they feel like they're going to be forever. And they're not forever.
I'm going to step in because I'm going to grieve the loss of this particular group of us talking, because we could go on for another hour. And Miss Sara, close us out.
Oh yeah, no, it's been brilliant, and I'm so grateful to you. But I know that, yes, but I did say at the before we came on air, anything short, finally, that we haven't touched on that you would like to share with folks, because I don't want to just close it out sort of having stopped everybody sort of mid-sentence. So, Michol, anything that you'd like to share that we haven't touched on?
I'm going to just close with this, that art and creativity are not a luxury like our society makes you think that they are. They're actually soul food. It is food for your soul and a powerful transformation tool at your disposal anywhere you go.
Frank.
I think the thing is that it also choice, and knowing that you do have a choice. And part of that is curating your day. Part of that is establishing your framework and foundation. And that's control. And that's one of the things we grieve the most, is our lack of control in this society and lives. And that's where it starts. And so that's the takeaway.
Scott, any final words?
The rituals that you perform in the morning, you can do any time in the day. You can reset your day. You can use breathing. You can use meditation. You can use any of the tools in your tool belt to restart your day, no matter where it is, even if it's going off the track. If it's chaos, reset it, get back on track.
I'm going to finish with a little bit of light language, which I'm very good at doing. But this is for your heart and your soul, folks. Your mind's not going to understand it. Hist tunaikai isht anakai te ma, saranta eshini aka, nit toi kashtei kate almana kate ishia, serante koshi nitia teke anikitia, lust I nikt a hash tunakina, noit tunakene che, me ta karaka che I, tirstoi ken chere, ken tiri kanche est noikate eaka. Always be true and kind to yourself. Namaste. Thank you so very much to Scott and to our amazing guests, Michol and Frank. It's been a fabulous conversation, and as you said, Scott, we could have gone on for ages. No problems at all. So thank you very much to both of you. Next week, I'm just going to be doing a little thoughtful nuggets and pearls. You didn't become selfish. You became harder to manipulate. I hope you'll join me. Take care. Be safe. Stay well. Namaste, sweet souls. Bye.
Bye-bye.